Good evening, everybody. I'm George Runkle with Runcon Incorporated, and I'm not going to talk about engineering shipping containers in this video. I'm going to talk about a managerial thing, an employee thing, um, and it's kind of an uncomfortable subject for many of us, but we're all going to go through it at one time or the other in our career, unfortunately, with the change in economy. What I'm going to talk about, are you getting fired? Um, Generally, firing, the people use different words to make it sound better. They'll talk about right sizing, headcount reduction, layoffs, termination, all kinds of different things. But it's all the same thing. You go in one day and you get told, we're letting you go. Don't come back in tomorrow. Clear out your desk by noon, or maybe we'll give you till Friday and then you're terminated. You've lost your job. You've lost your way of making a living. It, to all of us, is a big disaster in our lives. Many times, at least in my experience, the firing doesn't happen really the day you get laid off. Your employer will start to decide they want to get rid of you, could be 6 months to a year before you go. And there are key things that you can see that it's coming. I'm not in favor of how it happens a lot of times. A lot of times you'll have somebody that the company or the government agency decides they don't want anymore. Your boss doesn't like you, so you get tormented for 6 months and picked on, and your life is made miserable until the day they finally get up the nerve to call you in and fire you. I don't like that way of doing things from a managerial standpoint because it ruins morale, ruins your productivity, makes everybody unhappy, turns the place into just pure misery. But if you're on the other end of that, there is one good side about it. It gives you time to find another job, and you want to make use of that. Now, I break it down when you're terminating somebody, at least when I've let people go and when I've seen it happen, is there's basically, we can take two reasons. One is times are tough. Income is just not there. The company has not brought in the business it needs to. God, the Great Recession was a good indicator there. 2008, I went from having several employees to just me, stuck in 2,500 square feet of office space that was just me, and I'm making no money, and I'm paying out all this stuff. It was terrible. It was terrible for everybody. 1990, I got laid off from a job. You could see it coming for a year. Well, not a year, about 6 months. You could see business just going straight down, and you knew that it was the day was coming, and it was just sheer terror because how was I going to make a living? We didn't know if the company would survive. There was a whole lot of unknowns. It also can happen in government agencies when there's budget cuts. If you're like a temporary in a government agency, and I've seen that happen in budget cuts, the temps go. A lot of times people get hired in government agencies as temps. Another way government agencies get around issues of hiring is they hire people as contractors. They'll contract out to a private firm to provide people. You're in effect a government employee, but you're working for a private company. And that way the agency can let you go in a heartbeat. It's easy for them to bring you in and easy for them to get rid of you. And so that is the one way. The other way is they don't like you. Maybe you haven't measured up to expectations. Maybe there's some sort of personality conflict with your boss. I mean, there's a zillion reasons. Maybe you're just a bad person. Maybe you're not fit for the job. Now, when you're at the point of them letting you go, none of this matters. What matters is you got to get another job before the day that they tell you to clear out your desk and go, or not to come back tomorrow. There's a couple of things that I got to emphasize are really important when you're on the chopping block. First thing is, God, I can't emphasize this enough. Do not go to your boss and say, are you all going to be firing me? Or are you letting me go? Or is my job secure? They're going to say, oh, yeah, you're fine. I've seen it happen when we had a list of people that we were going to lay off. This was in 1990. I was on the list too, by the way. But anyway, we had a list of prioritization who was going to go. And I had already been told I was terminated, and I had a week left, and I'm sitting in my boss's office, and I watched a guy come in who I knew was next on the list to go. And he says, "Is my job secure here? I know a lot of people have lost their jobs." My boss says, "Oh yeah, you're fine. You don't have anything to worry about." Yeah, he did. He was the next on the list. My boss lied to him, and that's what happens. The other thing that can happen is maybe they haven't consciously come to the decision to get rid of you, but you go in and ask if I'm in danger of being fired. You bring it into their consciousness. I saw that happen one time in a place I worked where a guy that worked there walked into my boss and said, Are you guys going to fire me?" And it brought it to his attention. And my boss said, "You know what? Yeah, I'm getting rid of him." Don't do it. So don't do it. Second thing not to do. Let's say things are pretty rough. And I know I'm guilty of this. If, I'm working for somebody, it's happened to me before, they didn't like me, or things weren't very good, my instinct was to try to go in and talk to them to smooth things over, straighten stuff out. Don't do that. If you're having issues with your supervisor, your boss, stay clear of them. Just talk to them when you need to. Keep the conversation short and polite. Don't walk in and try to make small talk or try to make things better, because it just makes things worse. You're just going to irritate them. So stay clear. So those are two things that are important. Third thing, if there's things you're doing that's obvious that's irritating your employer, stop it. Don't give them any ammunition that they don't need. If you're habitually late, and that's a problem, because once you get in the habit of being late, it's real hard to break. If you're showing up 15 minutes late every day, trying to get yourself to be on time just isn't going to work. What you have to do in that case is readjust yourself. Let's say you got to be at work at 7:30 in the morning. Aim for 6:30 in the morning. Don't try to be in by 7:30, because you aren't going to change your routine enough. You're going to fall into that routine. You're going to be walking in the door at 7:45, 8 o'clock, like you always do. I had a job one time. Somehow I got in the routine. We had to start at 7:30. I walked in the door at 7:30, right on the dot. I don't know how I did it. Drove my coworkers crazy how I could do it. But it was just a habit. And I would actually speed up or slow down on my way into the office unconsciously to get myself in at precisely the right time. Now, that's not a bad habit. But what if I was doing that, I'd gotten in the habit of doing that at 7:45 or 8 o'clock in the morning? Hard to break it. So what you have to do is completely break it and go in early. There's other things. Don't take long, if you're taking long lunch breaks, if you talk on the phone a lot. I mean, all these things that might be irritating your employer, bring it to a stop. In 1990, when I lost my job, we were doing the layoffs. I was trying to fit in as best I could to hold on to my job as long as I could. In the culture of the place I worked at, people routinely worked 10 to 12 hours a day. I had a long commute. I had an hour and a half commute home. It took me an hour in the morning to get to work. Add that to trying to work at 10, 12-hour days. It was killing me. I was falling asleep when I'd stop at stoplights. I think it would have put me in an early grave. But it probably, by doing that, gave them less reason to be irritated with me. May have preserved that job a little bit longer. That's pretty important. You want to try to preserve your job as long as you can. It's just how it has to be. Now, there's a couple of things that happen, too, if you're on the chopping block. I don't know why this happens, but I've seen it repeatedly. Is everybody that you work with will start to pick on you. They'll start to notice things that you've done wrong and happily go to management and tell them, "Look what Joe did." Oh, it must be Friday. Joe had to go visit clients again. Oh, it must be, I see Joe's late. What's he doing? Oh, he's going to visit a client. He does that, That way he can come in at 10 in the morning instead of 7:30 like the rest of us. They'll do that stuff. It's kind of like, I heard from a guy that used to raise chickens that if you got a chicken that's sick or something, the other chickens will just gang up and kill it. Well, that's what's going to happen to you. I don't know if people do that, if they're worried they're going to lose their job, so they want you to lose your job, or it's just you get a target on your back. I knew a guy that was a total jerk that I used to work with. I worked for him, and he would spread rumors about people that they were due to get fired just to start people picking on him. I mean, That's human nature. Okay, so we got that clear. Now the other thing is, when you start suspecting you're going to get fired, and now there's been articles I've read how to know you're being fired and stuff. I'll put it simple. If you think that you're on the chopping block, you are. It's simple enough. What happens is you become an outsider. They start picking on you. Your supervisor stops making eye contact with you. You aren't invited to meetings. You aren't invited to go to lunch with everybody. You aren't invited to go out for drinks after work. All of a sudden, you're left out in the cold. You're on the chopping block. If you feel you're on the chopping block, you're on the chopping block. Start looking for a job immediately. Look fast. Because I don't know how long it could take them. It could take them 6 months to get rid of you, or they might get rid of you next week. You want to find the job before you're let loose. It's awfully hard to find the job when you're unemployed. It's a lot easier when you're employed. Now, what do you do when you tell people what you're looking for a job? Well, in 1990, when I was looking for a job, I went back to work for the Air National Guard. I'd been full-time. I think if you look back, if this thing zooms back, you see an Air National Guard. There it is. See? Here. Come on. Back up here. Let's see if it'll do it. Come on. You can do it. Oh, anyway, right up there to the side is an Air National Guard recruiting poster from back then. And the guy that's on the recruiting poster looks a hell of a lot like I did at the time it was done. I don't know who the guy was. And the ironic thing was he was on a job I worked on. Blueprints out there was a job I actually worked on later. He was just some poor guy they grabbed for the picture, for the recruiting poster. But anyway, I'm digressing. When I went back to the Air Guard from working for a private company, I told them what was happening. I'm on the chopping block, man. They're cutting people. Our business is down to crap. I need a job. And they took me back. If you're in that situation, you've got a former employer that likes you and you might be able to go back, do it, and tell them the truth, you know. But otherwise, don't get into too much detail, okay? The other place that I had a hard time, this is now when I lost my job in 1990, it was because of economic conditions. Back in 1984, I was working for a township and I was working for a petty tyrant. This man was horrible. And I did not have civil service protection at that time. In order to get civil service, you had to take the civil service exam in the state, and then you got civil service protection. And once you get civil service protection, you couldn't be fired. I'm a veteran, so I was at the top of the list no matter what. I could have gone in and wrote my name over and over again on that civil service test and nothing else, and I'd have passed it. And unless there was a disabled veteran taking the test, which would get him higher than me, I had the test nailed. So I was nailed into that job once I took the test. And the test was coming up. And my boss could fire me for no reason at all before I got civil service status. And it was obvious he was going to do it. He was screaming at me for everything. I'd walk through the municipal building. I remember one day walking through the municipal building and he's talking to a couple of councilmen. And they all looked at me and stared at me and then looked away and quit talking. So I knew he was talking about me because he's building the case up to the township council why he was terminating this engineer that he had. You know, he had to justify his little department. I went looking for a job. I interviewed at an engineering firm, a little teeny engineering firm, about the size of my firm right now. And I realize now, looking back, that guy that ran that engineering firm knew what my boss is like. My boss was known as a petty tyrant. He was a jerk. I went in there and I made the mistake of telling him while I was looking for the job. And this guy started to interrogate me. He took me for a ride in his car to go to a job he was going to, and it was a 2-hour trip I took. It was the 2 most long hours of my life. He wanted to know everything that was going on. Why was this man picking on me? Was I doing my job? He didn't need to know all that crap. He was just hiring an engineer. I shouldn't have told him anything. I should have said something to the effect was, I felt that I needed to go elsewhere to grow as an engineer. Something like that. Don't tell them about the problems you got where you're working. Seriously. If you're working for a tyrant, they probably know. You don't need to tell them, okay? The best thing is you're looking for growth. Now, the problem I had less than a year working for that township. It's kind of hard to find a job. If you've gone to a place and you've been there like a year and all of a sudden it looks like you're going to get let go, that gets a little difficult when, because people want stability. They don't want to hire you if they think you're going to leave in 6 months, that once you get trained and you're just going to get dissatisfied and go. So that gets a little bit difficult. So you have to kind of dance around a bit and say something to the effect like, I don't feel like the job is right for me. I don't feel like I have the growth that I could get there. I'm looking for something that would give me better career growth. Anything, kind of lighten it up. The other thing is to do is, I find good, is if you have professional societies or any kind of networking, that can help you find a job very quickly, because you'll hear about people. A lot of times people that are hiring, they don't advertise. I never have. So you go to, as an engineer, I'm a member of the American Society of Civil Engineers, Society of American Military Engineers, and all that stuff. You start going to the meetings. They happen once a month. You get a chance to talk to people, and you get to know people, and you can find a job. You should have done that originally before this happened. You always have your network there. But given you haven't done it, get the network in place. You need to do that. So when things get bad, you can find a job. The other thing is, if you've got a good network and things aren't working out for you where you are, you can tell people in your network the honest to God truth, what's happening, and they'll help you out because they know you. You don't want to do it after this starts. The other thing is if you're looking for a job, get on the phone and start calling people. Generally, people, at least in engineering, I think it's probably true in anything, will be polite when you're calling looking for a job in most cases. Sometimes they get kind of snippy and turn you over to the personnel department. They tell you to send a resume, and I've had a couple of times where they've hung up the phone on me. But most of the time, people are pretty good with you when you call for a job. I am. If you call me, I'll be nice to you. And if you call me right now, I'll tell you, I'm not hiring. I'm not hiring anybody again. It's just going to be me. But that's another story. But I'll be happy to talk to you for a few seconds. I won't be nasty. I just don't do that. And people won't. Okay, so there's the deal. And I know if you're going through this, it's a very hard time. And there's no way to sugarcoat it. Losing your job is bad. If it's happening right now, at least the economy's good. It gets worse as if you're losing a job when the economy's bad and you're stuck on unemployment, which is a fraction of what you're making, and you're trying to get by. And if you get long-term unemployed, it can be very difficult to find a job again afterwards. Again, that's why you won't find a job now. So if you're going through this, I wish you the best, and I hope you can find a job quickly, and all the best. I hope this video helps you in such a case. And until next time, take care.